yours. Use it, please, as you will. Amen.
Are you ready to start recording now?
Sure.
Did you want to get the prayers recorded?
No. I think we know everybody pretty well that's here. And the first thing I want to say to you guys is a heartfelt thank you for coming out. There were there's probably over 50 people invited. And this is not to be critical of them, but to offer gratitude to you. That for the most part, what we've encountered coming back this time more than ever is indifference to our work, to us, and it's tough. We can take it. We're not that fragile, but indifference to some of the people that I'm going to be showing you is a drag to be on the receiving end. So thank you for coming. If you know me, you know I'm not a speaker, so I would invite questions and interruptions, and more interactive is better. I could talk until Tuesday, and I will try not to, but I did something similar a few weeks ago, and it lasted about 90 minutes to give you some feel for what's ahead. What I'd like to do is first give you a quick glimpse of our family currently. We have our first granddaughter in the front, and the rest are our kids and or spouses of our kids. This was taken at Christmas, so it's relatively new. What I would like to do is go through, many of you are familiar with our work, and so my motive is to say thank you for your interest in our work and to remind you what you're interested in, if that makes sense, to remind you of what you're supporting. Many of you are supporting this work, and to remind you that support that you're sending is going to the people that I'll be showing you. And some of it will be stuff you already know, and I'll try and fly through. My method is a gazillion pictures and rather quickly as I talk. So we'll move pretty quickly through pictures, but not necessarily the message. Angola is here. Another picture. Southwest Africa. It's about 4 times the size of Ohio, and it's got the population about the size of Canada, 30 million or so. Where we are in Angola is Kavango at the end of the arrow. It's pretty centrally located. It was in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It was a leprosarium, and then during the war, it kind of got knocked out. Some horrid stories that go along with that. But a hospital was established there in 1970, and then it was destroyed in the war in 1976. And nothing was going on at Kavango until, medical-wise, until we moved there in 13. And it's nice and centrally located. Wambu, the city above the red dot, is the closest city to us, and it's about 3 or 4 hours away. So grocery store, fuel is about 3 or 4 hours away. About half and half dirt and pavement. Where we live is simple. These are the houses and outbuildings. No toilet paper, toothpaste, stores, electricity, running water, conveniences. It's about as basic as you can get. No health care, which is why we're there. Some more pictures of some of the houses. The house is on the left, the kitchen is on the right in this picture. Another little village here. These are the villages that surround us. The people that we interact with sometimes are somewhat exotically tribal, and a lot of them are not. These are a couple pictures of some of the more exotic people in the tribes that we serve. Mainly, the living is as we would consider camping full-time. They're cooking over an open fire. Most of them are sleeping around a fire, and these pictures are taken from around our clinic. So the patient will be sitting, hopefully having a bed. About half of our inpatients have beds, and about half of our inpatients sleep out by the fire. And the families all sleep out by the fire. We've got about 12 of these. They're called jangus, It's like a shelter house-ish thing. We've got about 12 of those constructed for for families to sleep under. You can see they set up camp. It's actually quite a community. There's often 200 or 300 people there. When they come, they're no rush to leave. They make new friends. They support each other. They help each other. It's quite a nice community that develops around the hospital. This is just an indicator of we're putting in a duct-taped solar unit on top of a pole, and we're putting it into the ground and just to provide some light at one of our areas. So this is where we used to live. It's a pretty nice, small house that when you walk inside, it would feel pretty American, pretty, except for being pretty small. This is what it looked like a few years ago. The house where we used to live is on the right. The building on the left is kind of an outbuilding, and it's got trucks and cars and parts and storage. And we took that building on the left, and Bets and I made that into an apartment for us. And where we used to live in the house is now a family of 7 who are living there. And we have another family of 7 that's going to join us at the end of this year, and we need to construct another house for them. So it's getting crowded from a housing perspective. This is how we travel. When we go to the city every month or two, and we usually come back pretty loaded. We always joke about Jed Clampett when we load up our car. There's getting ready for another trip here. Meds, food, everything has to come from the city. Here we're transporting, these barrels are empty, transporting empty barrels to the city to get filled with fuel. Here's Beth loading up a car. It doesn't look like it's early morning, but she's got the headlamp on because it's real early morning. Sometimes we have difficulties. Kind of often we have difficulties. We're driving through roads that are like this in the rainy season, and frequent problems. This was a fun one, but we got out. This is how they travel. So we travel on those cars. This is how they travel. Almost everything is by foot, carrying as much as they can. I should say this is how the women travel. I never get tired of seeing them carry things on their heads. Again, I'm trying as best to create a picture of the culture. Things on their heads because it saves their back. If we were walking everywhere and carrying things, we would do the same because of carrying things on your side, in front, behind, eventually would create a lot of back difficulty. This is a great picture for a couple of reasons. One, they have to gather wood twice a day for their open fires. 2, this woman has a broken leg, and she's going to get the wood for her fire. Yes, she does have a husband who's sitting by the fire while she goes and does this. And one of the things about the Angolan culture that is absolutely pathetic is that the men do virtually nothing and the women do virtually everything. And this is a picture that depicts that, which is one of the reasons I like the picture. Another picture of carrying wood. They do it twice a day, go around scrounging dead wood. Just some pictures I never get tired of seeing this, so just some pictures that I took of different people carrying things on their head. Interestingly, this girl was in a coma for, I think, almost 3 weeks, and she's gotten to the point where she's walking home on crutches with her mom. Some more wood gathering. This is how mom travels, carrying everything, including the kids. And normally the father will saunter behind them about 10 minutes carrying nothing and yucking it up with probably another guy who's carrying nothing, whose wife is up ahead doing everything. Sometimes it's adorable. They learn at an early age. These women I'm traveling and going to another village and where I'm staying, and they're bringing my water to me on their heads from the river for bathing and drinking, whatever. When they can get a hold of a wheelbarrow, it's a great help for transportation. Great picture, just depicts that almost all the footprints that we see in the dirt, and everything's dirt, almost all of them are barefoot. This guy is a beautiful man. We've treated his whole family at our clinic over 10 years, and we happened to be driving by and saw him. He's carrying all this stuff, going from his house to his field. They live by their field, and he's going down to his field to work for the day and then come back. He's got a bow with some arrows, and pretty simple stuff, pretty simple. These guys are going fishing, kind of the Huck Finn picture. This is how they travel as well. If they make it to a road, they want to go to the city. These trucks come every day, and they load up beyond anything safe, but that's how they travel to the city. They also travel by motorbike. Little guy on his dad's motorbike. Another one. We usually have quite a few motorbikes. They're dirt bikes, kind of dirt/street bikes, and most villages are between 500 and 1,000 people, and most villages have one or two or three people with dirt bikes, and it's a business for them to give people rides, especially to the hospital. This is another mode of travel. They've got her strapped. This is what it looks like when we took her off. They made a cot in between two bikes and put her on it, and I think she walked they took her 6 hours, left at 5 in the morning, got to our place. Well, actually, someone got to our place at about 10 or 11, and we got in the car and went and picked her up. She was having a miscarriage and kind of a brutal delivery. We have a company that hired homeless people in Los Angeles and came up with this idea to make trailers that are essentially cots on wheels that can attach to motorbikes. And so we put one of these in each of the villages within an hour of our clinic, and we often have them bringing in people who can't sit on a motorbike, so they lay them in the cot and very slowly bring them. Here's one guy coming in a coma. Another patient delivered. Sometimes we have visitors. This was a team that began construction on this building. I'll show you another picture of this building. It is now a full shell, about 100 feet by 40, that's just full of beds and mattresses. It was a beautiful, beautiful help. Team from Michigan, Colorado, California, and Missouri of about 10 guys. They all chipped in. Some of them have construction experience, some of them didn't, and they put up the steel uprights, they put up the trusses, and they put up the roof. And then the local guys laid block all around essentially put in the walls and did a great job. Sometimes we have visitors. There's a couple of visitors of ours, friends of ours from Columbus. Also a friend from Columbus, another friend from Columbus. This is a picture that just shows women and their babies. The women take great pleasure in being moms and raising their kids. Dads do almost nothing. The women form a community among themselves that's quite beautiful, and I see young men and women growing up pretty doggone healthy because they are part of a community, mainly of women who care for them as if each kid would say they have 3 or 4 moms. And I used to think that a nuclear family was really important for someone's upbringing. I don't think that anymore. I think a nuclear family or a real healthy community is really healthy for a person's self-esteem as they grow. One or the other. Unfortunately, in our country, we're kind of losing both. But here, they don't have a nuclear family, but they have an incredibly healthy community, especially among the moms. It's just some kids with a ball of string. That's about the best soccer ball they can come up with. To show you, just give you another example of the culture, these kids, and a lot of times 2 or 3 times, they show up every Sunday afternoon, and we save our cans. It's not recycling, but we save all of our cans, wash them out, put them in a bag, and these kids all show up for a used can, and it is a treasure to them. It's how simple the culture is. This lady's got a bundle of grass she's holding together and bending over, and that's how they sweep, and they sweep the dirt because there is no grass per se. You can see some grass here, but it's mainly like, what would we call that? Weeds. This is what a feast looks like in Angola. This was a huge banquet for the end of the year that we put on for the workers. Pretty simple fare. You may have heard of baobab trees. They're kind of African, and they dot our landscape, and they're incredibly beautiful. This is how they sell their meat. You wouldn't want to focus in too much and see the flies, but if it's cooked well, it's edible. They kill rats for meat. Protein is this little guy was so proud he showed me the rat that he killed, and he will go home and cook it and eat it. We raise kittens. We have a kitten factory at our house because we have a few fertile moms. And so we raise these kittens and we distribute them freely to the people in the village who love them because of rat control. There's a public health saying, maybe you've heard, and that is, of all the consumable food in the world, 1/3 is eaten, 1/3 is wasted, and 1/3 is eaten by rats. And so that's a pretty impressive statistic, and I think it holds true in Angola. We have some great wildlife. These are hippos that live near us below our river, and beautiful creatures that we get to see not very often. I would say 3 or 4 times a year. They don't like coming where people are, but they're down where I run in the mornings, and sometimes they're in a part of the river that I run by. We have a lot of crocodiles. I didn't get close enough to one to take a picture, but this is one that was delivered to some people we know. The head was delivered, and so it's just a picture for me to remember to say we have plenty of crocodiles, but they are also easy to avoid because they don't want to be anywhere near people. So you have to really work hard, dig through a lot of ugly weeds to get to crocodiles. We have tigerfish in our river. They're like piranha, except they're shaped differently, but they have the same teeth. We have a lot of monkeys. This guy's selling a monkey, trying to sell a monkey to us. This is termites. Termites rule. Termites absolutely rule. I come back here and I can't believe that we can actually construct buildings with wood because it's impossible there, because they've never been eradicated. So our house, we're constantly putting out termite fires, if you will. They're constantly invading, sometimes destroying nice baskets. If we're gone for a weekend, we could come back to this, and they got in through the floor. We have army ants. Army ants are crazy, crazy, crazy. A room this size, there will be 5 or 6 of these trails coming, and they will merge, and then they'll start marching forward in, formation, and they will continue for miles, and they will eat every living thing in their path that they can get a hold of. And we've had kittens defleshed that we didn't know. The ants had arrived during the night, and we've had some awful stories. Children sometimes are eaten by these ants. They're just really impressive. We get them they come through our place maybe twice a year. Easy to discourage. Like when they come through, I just put a ring of diesel around my house, and they won't come near the house. But there was one morning, impressive morning, I walked out my house and looked out at the lawn. It's not really a lawn, but looked out at the lawn. It was like coffee grounds that were doing this. And there were so many covering the lawn that just looked like coffee grounds. Some cool frogs. These guys are hunting, and it's a deer-like thing that they trapped because there's no guns. This guy I thought looked like wildlife, so I took his picture. There was some funky cats. This is called a pangolin. We've got some really funky animals as well. This thing's got mysterious powers and used all over the world. It's the most hunted animal in the world. We have them by us. Essentially, it's a real fancy anteater. We have some nasty snakes. This has got a whole story associated with it, but this was in the dead of night with no lights in their hut. Our neighbors heard some scurrying. The chickens sleep inside with them. Heard some scurrying of the chickens, and I don't know how he did it, because when it's black there, it's black. You know, when it's night, when it's dark, it's dark. There are no lights. Somehow he figured out it was a snake, and he killed it and showed it to us the next day. What I couldn't believe is he and his family went back to their house the next night and went to sleep. I don't think I would have been able to do that. This is called a black mamba. It's one of the deadliest snakes in the world, and we have them by us. This was heading right towards a group of people when they discovered it and killed it with a stick. Stick is the best weapon against snakes. They call it a 2-step snake. If you get bit by a black mamba, you'll make it about 2 steps. Kids are always looking for, just like kids here, this guy climbed a tree and got some baby owls. He came wanting to sell it to us. This is a nice snack when you're traveling, and it's available everywhere in Angola, so we always fry them up good, and there's not much taste to them, but they're okay. Kind of a novelty. We have a thing on our hospital grounds. You know, the culture that we live in, animals roam. Pigs, goats, cows, dogs, all roam. There's no fences. There's no fencing material except for wood, and that's eaten by termites. So there's no fences, but we have a rule on our hospital grounds, no animals allowed because of parasites and illness. And so when a hospital wanders on the property, I tell them all I'm going to pay you the equivalent of about 10 American dollars. And you kill it, and then you bring it to us, and we're all going to cook it up and distribute it among the patients. The biggest malnutrition need among our patients is protein. And so serves multiple purposes. When these guys killed this pig and brought it, and we distributed it. This little church in the village, where we are, is actually called a mission. It's called Kavango Mission. It was established from this leprosarium way back when. And that's really important in Angola because with a mission, you get certain exemptions, and you don't have to bow every week to somebody in the government. So you get these exemptions, and it allows you to function pretty freely. And that's really important for us. We never thought we would go to Kavango and serve in a mission. But we went to Kavango and found out that after we were there about a year, that everybody that we were talking about knew nothing of Jesus. And I'll talk a little bit more about that going forward. So we essentially went to Angola to work among people who had never heard. And we went and worked at something called a mission. And we were working with people who had never heard. This is an offering on Sunday morning. This is what they bring forward. There's very little money. It's a cashless society, so when they need something, they trade with each other, either a service or a product. We bring games like this. Checkers is real popular, so we bring games to give. We're always trying to think of ways that we can serve the people who literally sit at the hospital all day. We treat them usually in the morning, and there is nothing for them to do until the following morning when we see them again. So we're always I was dialoguing back and forth with some people earlier about how can we get there some swing sets for the kids. There's probably 100 kids who will stay with us for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And I'm dying to figure out a way to get these kids something that they can enjoy. This is another game that they play in the dirt. They live very closely to the ground. Where I might hesitate, laying down, taking a nap on the ground, these guys don't at all. They live very comfortably in connection with the ground. When I'm doing exams on patients all the time, they lift up their shirt and there's ants or bugs, and it doesn't bother them. They've gotten used to it, where might bother me a little bit. We deal with police, culture. The culture, Angola is a communist police state. All that means is high control and no freedom, versus our state where we value freedom. And we value control of the government, but we would like to see our populace more free, right? And it's the reverse there. So we get visits from police all the time. These guys happen to be local village chiefs who are coming and having a meeting in front of our house. This is another similar meeting. Another part of the culture is I give a sucker to every child try to give a sucker to every kid I ever come in contact with during my day at the hospital. These kids most of them have never had candy before, but the next day they will show up just to say hi to me, of course. But they're looking for their candy, and I gladly give it. So we buy a lot of suckers. We give out a lot of suckers every day. These kids are showing up just to say hi to the doctor, right? Here's some more kids showing up for their treat. These guys, I don't think are for that. I think these guys are just some kids. Kids dominate the culture. In contrast to our culture, the vast majority of the population is under 18. This is the Angolan mask mandate. When that came out, we got a picture of these guys who are trying to comply. This is just a kid with his homemade toy. This is how they carry their babies. This is what we would call it like a yard of cloth, and they wrap it around and makes a great pouch. Pretty adorable little thing. This is just a fun picture for me. It's an interesting picture. So this is how they get into bed. These guys don't have beds, right? So when they're ready to sleep, they step onto their mat and they lay down. So then when they're presented with a bed and I say lay down, they step up on the bed just like they would a mat, and then they lay down. And it's just it's a crazy thing to watch every day. And here's one I caught on camera. This is Eduardo. I'll talk a little bit more about him, who's joined us with his family in Kavango and Betsy. They're about 6 kilometers from our house, up on a mountain at a very specific spot, and you can get cell coverage. So these guys are out making a phone call. About 6 kilometers, 3 miles away. This is a family that we see situations like this often. 3 of these guys had malaria. The girl on the left came in a coma, and she actually had heart failure and was in a coma because of cerebral malaria. She did really well. But the interesting thing about this picture is the baby on the right is her baby, and her mom is the one is the adult on the right, and the baby on our left is the mom's baby. So you see this a lot in Angola, where mom and daughter have babies the same age. We do a lot of things to try and serve the people besides medicine. One of the things, poverty is just a real difficult thing for a lot of people, and rivers are completely separating. So when the rainy season comes, if there's a river, people on this side do not go to the other side. And they wait until the dry season. So there's a lot of families on each side of the river. And we know that there's a lot of regions on each side of the river that can make it to our clinic if we would give them access. So in this river, we built this bridge. We built pillars up with cement and rock from the bottom up. And then put in some of this wood, and then put this on top. It looks pretty dangerous, no railing, that sort of thing, but they love it. We've been told that 1,000 people per week now use this bridge and who otherwise wouldn't have been able to do that. So it's a great service to provide. One of the cool stories about this is, I had never done this before, but apparently if you look at those rocks on the other side, they had to be leveled. They were about twice that high, and we had to destroy them or break them up. And so they poured gasoline all over them, and quickly after pouring gasoline, one of their chosen teenagers would carry a grass full of fire and would run up and throw gasoline, which was all over these rocks and seeping in the cracks, and then he would dive back, and it was a dynamite explosion. I'd never seen it done. I mean, it's every bit as, and the rocks went flying. So they broke up all these rocks by this extremely dangerous method of pouring gasoline and then lighting it with a fire. But it did the trick. It's the way it's done in Angola. The other river, the way to cross it is by dugout canoe. Here's our neighbor who's bringing somebody across the river. In this river, we designed this raft, and we stuck it in the water, and it floated. So this river, we have plans this year to build a barrel bridge across it to give people access. We're told that several hundred people a week will cross this once we get easy transport. So a lot of work necessary, quite apart from medicine. So from a culture perspective, if you're ever tempted to feel sorry for us, there is some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff in Angola. I run to the river every morning, and it looks like this almost every morning. And it's about a mile, probably about a mile and a half to the river, a mile and a half back. This is the river. It's a big, beautiful white water river. And it's where the hippos are. Sometimes I see them, sometimes I don't. But that's essentially how I start my days. My walks to the river are therapy, because you guys need to know, and I'm sure you already do, that what I have showed you and what I will show you coming up as far as our specific work is in no way easy. And I joke around that David in the Psalms, if we translated some of his Psalms to English in 2022, a lot of them might be WTF. You know, he starts his Psalms and he's saying, what in the world is this? What's going on? And then by the end of the Psalm, he's resolved to say, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to follow you, Father, you know? And often my walks, when I'm leaving runs, I'm wondering how in the world can I go back there again today? And by the time my walk is done, my walk with my Father, which sometimes can be pretty colorful, I'm ready to go back. So the walk to the river in this beauty is kind of like the song, I walk in the garden alone with my Father, you know? I don't think without running and walking like that, I don't think I could continue in the work that we do. This next set of pictures is I'm going to fly through them. It really is to show you what we all know, is that these guys are just people like us. It's just a bunch of pictures that are pictures of people, adorable, beautiful. They're getting their suckers, obviously. Sick, with a mom that cares, dad that cares. Just crazy, 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 beautiful people who live crazy, crazy, difficult lives. This guy's got a malnutrition that caused his severe bow-leggedness. Eduardo is the Italian-looking guy. He's actually from Brazil, but he and his family joined us. The two other guys are the construction guys that built the apartment that I showed you earlier. Some incredibly beautiful people. A story with each one. None of these pictures were taken except that they had a crazy story to tell, and so I took the story to remember, but there's no way I could go into them. I just wanted to show you just how beautiful they are, and they are. The next, these are, you can imagine these guys are again here to say hi to the doctor, right? Doctor showed up and they just wanted to say hi and get their sucker. Oh, by the way, the next thing, a real important part of our work. So we start our days every day at 7:30, and we gather all the patients and their families to the front of the clinic, and we share with them for an hour, 7:30 to 8:30, half hour of each. How can we improve our physical health, and how can we improve our spiritual health? They need to hear both. I make it interactive. I'm often asking questions. Often I'll say, how many people here believe that there's a God? Every hand will go up. How many people here pray? Every hand will go up. How many people know anything about God? How many people know his personality or what he's like? Maybe 3 hands will go up. And so I'll ask them questions about how many people know the story about Jesus walking on water? Out of 100, maybe 3 hands will go up. How many people have heard that Jesus came back to life after being dead? Maybe 5 hands will go up. So what these interactions have done for me is give me a feel for who I'm speaking to. And so I can gauge both of my talks, physical health, spiritual health, to try to communicate to them where they are. And it's a beautiful time. It's my favorite time of the day. It's crazy, crazy cool. It's like when Jesus sat on a rock on a hill and gathered people around. It's like that type of feeling, And we invite these people to come. We don't tell them to come. And so everybody that's there, it's about half probably come. And I'm often telling them, sometimes on one of my more ornery days, I'll say, I admire you guys. You have come because you're hungry to learn. The only people who learn are people who are hungry to learn. And you guys are hungry to learn, and you're going to learn something here. And so then I'll start in, and then I'll say, and look at them. They know it all. They don't need to learn squat. And I just set that up as a distinction because they don't think that way. They don't think in terms of learning. They have no books. They have no magazines. They have nothing to learn from other than sitting around their fire at night and listening to their elders tell stories. That's all they have, which is something. And we need more of that. But they don't ever have somebody come with the purpose and desire to teach them how to improve their lives. So these are I'm going to fly through just a few pictures of some of the meetings, which are some of them smaller, some of them larger, depending on who comes. And it is a beautiful, beautiful time. Now we've taught some of our workers, and they will do the presentation at times. And it's a great time. It's a great opportunity to share. The principal motive behind what I share about Jesus is I want you guys to know who Jesus is and that he has nothing to do with religion and he has nothing to do with whatever you probably associate him with. But he is calling you to walk with you, and you can have a relationship with Jesus today. And essentially, my message is wrapped up in that, using a lot of his stories, which his stories from his time are a lot more meaningful sometimes to them than they are to us because they still live there. Just a couple more. This guy on the left who's standing up and speaking, he got up. It was so cool. He got up. He came from the city, which means he came from a place with huge hospitals. Came from the city, and he went on and on about, I have never encountered anything like this. He was there for about 3 days. I have never, he's talking to the people, are you listening to what you're able to hear? I've never heard this, ever. They're talking about how you can know God. They're talking about how you can avoid disease, how you can take care of your kids. And he was just our advocate. He stood up and spoke to his own people and said, are you kidding me? And so it was really cool moment.
So Tim, when you're here, who's doing those meetings?
Yeah, so I'll introduce you. Oh, actually, Eduardo. So you can see him there on the right. So I'll tell you a little bit about the story of Kavango, which I think I was meaning to do way at the beginning and forgot. The other thing I forgot to say is stop me and interrupt me anytime, because small group, we can interact. So Eduardo and Jocelyn. Eduardo's from Brazil. Jocelyn's from America, from Minnesota. They met 20 years ago. She was with YWAM in Bolivia. Met Eduardo, who was doing some traveling. They got married, moved to Southern Texas. He went to medical school in Mexico because he couldn't get in the United States because he was from Brazil. And Jocelyn worked as a nurse while he was in medical school. With the purpose, they did this all with the purpose of eventually going to the developing world and practicing. After that, they went up to Minnesota. All along the way, they had 4 kids. In Minnesota, he couldn't get into a residency after he completed medical school, so he took a job at one of the Indian reservations in Minnesota, was going to do it for a year. It ended up being like 15, one of those things. It was a great job. It was a great fit. He loved the ministry. It was a beautiful opportunity to be Jesus to people who were really hurting. And then their call to ministry was reignited somewhere in there, and they ended up coming to Brazil. They came to Angola, not knowing anything about Kavango. They came to Angola to work in the city hospital, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, where we send our surgical patients. It's a big, beautiful mission hospital in Lubango, about 10-hour drive away, 2-hour flight away. They came to work there. So they worked there the first year, and somewhere along the end of the first year, they said, we were visiting Lubango. We had a nice conversation with them. We didn't know them. And they said, hey, you guys need a break, whatever, come on out to Kavango and just get away from everything. There's no cell phones. We were not in recruiting mode. We just said, hey, come on out. They came out, and Jocelyn said, I think we ought to move here. And Eduardo said, I don't think so. It was normal marriage stuff, right? Disagreement. And so then they went back, and about a year later, they said, hey, can we come out again? They came out again. Jocelyn said, I think we ought to move here. Eduardo said, maybe. And so another period of time later, they talked to us seriously and said, we would really like to consider moving out there. The problem was, Bets and I were living in a house, and it was the only house out there with running water, electricity, that sort of thing. Electricity, solar, kind of complicated, but we had power. And so we kind of gauged their interest. Are they really serious? Okay, they're really serious. So we built this apartment next to their other house where we could share water, electricity, internet, generator, all this stuff. And they moved out to our house. We moved into the apartment, and we were concerned. Kavango is not an easy place to live. And so they said, we think we want to move out there. And we said, we don't want a commitment from you until at least 6 months. And 6 months, about 3 months in, they said, we're sure. We were called to serve people like this. So the thing about Eduardo and Jocelyn is if 3 years ago someone would give me a blank piece of paper and said, write the absolute ideal couple that you would like to work with you, I could not have written anything more beautiful than these guys. They're humble, they're passionate, they love Jesus, they love these people, they've got a great work ethic, they're not afraid to work, and they don't mind being isolated. I mean, it is like the perfect. They live simply. It's just the crazy perfect couple. So they moved out in February. They have lived there now since then. We were on hyper training mode until November. She's a nurse practitioner. He's a physician. So we trained them. I trained them until November. And then we left, and they were on their own. And so we've been apprehensive that how is this going to go, right? Because it's not it's hard to go into in a short period of time. The medicine is not what wears you out. It's all the police ridiculousness, the lack of funds, the rationing of care. There's so many things that wear you out, decisions that have to be made, and we didn't know if they could handle it. And they've been in contact with me almost every day for about an hour, and they have done superbly. So they're gonna do it. They're gonna be out there with us, and we are no longer alone after 8 or 9 years. And we now have a team, and we are absolutely thrilled. And there's now a nurse practitioner from California who also wants to join us. And so Kavango, now a pilot, wants to bring a plane, and we think that's going to happen this year. So Kavango, which was an isolated place for us to work and try to serve these people, is now going to be a pretty significant team effort. Another meeting. This is a group came and showed the Jesus film, and it was a huge hit. And here another group came and did a kids ministry, and this is a picture of that. It was really, really beautiful. The last thing I want to go through is our work, and this would typically take the most time, so I want to be sensitive. It is already an hour past almost. So I'll try as best I can to describe our work. And remember, my motive, most of you guys know our work, so my motive is to speak as by way of reminder. This is what we're doing, and for those of you who are supporting this work, this is what you're supporting. You're not supporting us, right? This is what you're supporting, so I want to encourage all of you who are supporting this work. This is it. Our motive is nothing more complicated than the story of the Good Samaritan. I wrote kind of an autobiographical. At the end of this, we'll give you, if you don't have our website, where I write periodically real short blog posts. A couple blog posts ago, I wrote a parable that's kind of autobiographical. It's kind of, I put myself in it and called the main character Pezinho, which means little feet. And if you're interested, it's called An African Parable. You might be interested, but it's an offshoot. It's kind of a tangent of the Good Samaritan. But the Good Samaritan is really the story that drives us. We see ourselves as having been many times in our life in places of need, and we want to be there for somebody who has need. This is our hospital. This is the clinic. Our current clinic that we've had for the last 8 years. The building on the left is the clinic where we have consultations. We have a small pharmacy, and we have a little OB room for deliveries. We have a small emergency room and a place for registration. The building on the right is the only inpatient building that we've had for the last 8 years. These are 3 new buildings we're putting up. They're going to allow, so we have, I'll tell a little bit more about our inpatients, but these will allow us to put far more beds under roofs, and that's our goal. We also want to improve, this is them kind of moving along, all built by local guys, and they've done a great job. We want to have an x-ray unit. We would like to have a simple laboratory because it will just improve our ability to serve well and make accurate diagnoses to help. This is the inpatient ward, pretty simple. Some mattresses on the floor, that's pretty much the norm. This is how we hang mosquito nets. So the building that I showed you before with the team, that they were coming to build a structure with steel. This is the building in the back is what it ended up looking like. It's a fantastic building, and we can put 40 mattresses on floors in there, and it serves people wonderfully. The foundation going on in the front got delayed 2 years because of COVID, so the foundation is done, and we're hoping to build a main hospital building there in 22, 23. It'll probably take 2 or 3 years to get it done. Nothing happens quickly in Angola. We've put in multiple TB buildings for TB patients. They all look about like this. And each of those rooms has 2 beds. And we average about close to 50 inpatient TB patients. And they kind of need to be separated from the rest of the population. So we have a dedicated TB space. When we complete our new hospital, all of our current hospital will be just TB, and our new hospital will be for sick people. One of the things that's real important to know about our hospital is about half of our inpatients sleep here. About half of our inpatients sleep outside by a fire or under a tree. Inpatients, and we don't keep people who aren't sick. Many of these people would be in ICUs in our country, and they're sleeping out because we don't have beds, so they're sleeping outside. This guy had to remove his eye. He had a horrible infection. I had to remove his eye. This is where he slept, outside on a mat, 1 day after surgery like that, Tylenol and Advil for pain. He survived and did well. But that's what we're dealing with as far as lack of facilities. These just 3 women, none of them are patients, found a spot and slept. These are the jangus I was telling you about. They're like the shelter houses. We have about, I think, 12 now, and we're building them all the time to facilitate patients. This is what our clinic looks like in the morning before we begin seeing patients. We have a staff meeting every Monday at 8. These are a couple pictures of the staff meeting. And it's my opportunity to instill what it's like to serve people in Jesus' name, right? And the value that he places on service. You know, guys, you guys know, service is not valued in our culture. If you go to a million church services, you'll hear everything about worship. You'll hear everything about prayer. You'll hear everything about the presence of God. You'll hear everything about all this stuff. And it's been a long time since I heard someone talk about sweat and serving people. And so we have a little bit different view as what Jesus would have us do. And we get Monday mornings at staff meeting, we get the opportunity to instill what we see as Jesus' vision for us in our staff. And they're quite receptive. Some of the most beautiful people that I know serve with me at Kavango. Our only technology is an ultrasound machine, and we use it a lot, and it's a beautiful thing to have. This type of machine was developed by veterinarians so that when they went out in the field, they'd have some means of making diagnosis, and we use it all the time. We pray for every patient. Essentially, we tell them, we are going to do everything we can. Jesus gave us an example that when he healed one guy, he used mud and spit on his hand, and he healed the guy, right? And we tell people, we're mud and spit. It's not us that's important here. It's if you get better, Jesus made you better. But we're going to do everything we can to help. You know, Jesus talked about a glass of water for someone who's thirsty. So we feel like we're partnering with Jesus. We are his hands, right? Literally, we are his hands. He has chosen to use us that way. And we see miracles every day. We see people who get better that should never have gotten better every day. We see almost everybody get better. But it's not a healing conference. There's no music and there's no altar call. And we usually use a pill or a shot. We use whatever tool we have. Just like we would if we were building a house. Just like we would if we were helping people in another way. We would do what we can to help, right? And so we see ourselves as servants and hands, and yet we tell every single person, let's ask our Father to help in this situation because we are limited and he's not. Amen? We do a lot of OB. Almost all of our OB, this was not, but almost all of our OB is catastrophic. Most deliveries are done at home and they come in to see us when something has gone very wrong. This is a couple of twins that were born there. A lot of, because of malnutrition, we have a lot of prematurity. We have a lot of premature babies that actually do pretty well, but they don't look very good when they come out. This little kid was 5 minutes without breathing or a pulse. And just through mouth to face and chest compressions for 5 minutes, the kid ended up being absolutely fine. You can see by the shape of his head that there was a little bit of a struggle coming out, right? So this was one of our great stories, as was this one. This one also was 5 minutes, and crazy cool story. We treated a lot of broken bones. This poor kid fell out of a tree, broke both wrists. Broken bone, broken bone. Look at this guy. Over a year. Broke both bones in his forearm, and he lived with this for over a year because he didn't know anybody was available to fix it. This lady lived almost 3 years with a separated shoulder, walking around like this, could not use her shoulder for 3 years. Until she came to us, we said it in 5 minutes. But that's what, in a place that has no access to modern medical care, that's what people deal with. And a lot of these pictures, look at them through that lens. Sometimes what you see maybe doesn't look so awful, but think of it in a setting where you have dirt floors and you have nowhere to go. You know that they don't know what a doctor is. They don't know what a nurse is. They've never met any. So it's just crazy the setting in which we find ourselves. He fractured his femur, so he was like this for 3 months. Fractured skull, did real well, pulled a motorcycle on top of his head. This lady came in, she just tripped on, she's about 80, she just tripped on a stone because there's no sidewalks or anything, right? She tripped, went down, broke her wrist, broke her hip. And she was a gnarly old 80-year-old and a lot of fun. But this is the treatment we have in Kavango. You can see that she's in traction. And that's what you have to do with a femur fracture, or most fractures. You have to traction it and get the bones lined up, right? You have to line up the bones. So we do that with a femur fracture with traction. And so we've got traction going on a rope up to a rafter and down with a cement block. So that's the tension. And she was like this until we could get her to a hospital for surgery. I don't remember how long she was like that, but she was so grateful because when you're in traction, it's just like a cast. It's immobilized. And so there's no more pain. This lady's crying because she had gone to clinic after clinic, shaman after shaman, feeling ill from the city, actually, feeling ill for I think over a year, maybe 6 months to a year. She came in 5 minutes, we diagnosed her with diabetes, and she was ready to go home in this picture, and she's telling us how grateful she is that she's never felt like this in how long. A lot of goiter. We put iodine in our salt for a reason. And they don't have iodine, they don't have salt. So we have a lot of women with crazy goiter tumors. They tolerate them well. Some pictures don't really describe much. This guy came in, we have a lot of severe heart failure. This guy had severe heart failure. This is just a scar. It's called a keloid. It's very common. And this is her after we sent her to our buddies in Lubango to get surgery. I couldn't get a picture with her smiling. She was beaming the whole day. She could not believe that there was a way to get rid of that. And these guys got rid of it, and probably a surgery lasted less than an hour. This guy's swollen, as well as this guy, because they have it's called post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. All that means is they have inflammation of the kidneys because strep throat didn't get treated. They never go to the doctor for strep. They never go anywhere for strep. And about probably 1 out of 20, 1 out of 25 people with strep throat, the toxin of the strep will go on and cause an inflammatory condition in the kidneys, the heart, or the joints. And these guys had severe kidney failure. They all did great, but we see a lot of kids who come in with post-strep kidney disease. This is him before he went home. This is just a story that is beyond telling. This lady gave birth to her first child. She developed pain in her breast, started swelling. They waited because what do I do? Where do I go, right? They waited. She finally came in to see us. Her breast was about 3 times normal size, humongous, all full of pus. So we drained it and we took it out, put a drain in, thought that was it. Next day she wakes up in a coma. And we find out through some simple diagnostics that this raging infection that she had got in her blood and went to her brain and her back, and she developed meningitis. She went into a coma. She was in a coma for over a week. We're treating this infection. We're treating her meningitis. She's in a coma for about a week. This guy was a completely atypical husband. He was there every day. He was serving her. He was asking us what he could do. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And she survived. This is her before going home. She's in a coma for about a week. She starts gradually coming around. Her wounds healed. She ended up losing the skin on an area about that large, and she had to stay with us. We got to know him well. She had to stay with us for like 6 months before the wound finally healed. Beautiful story. There's so many. This is the type of nurses we have. This kid on the left has severe, it's called Burkitt's lymphoma. It's a type of lymphoma cancer. This is one of our nurses walking him from one building to another, and that's the type of guys that we have in our clinic, and it's beautiful. Almost all of our nurses are men. This lady had a tumor behind her eye, an abscess behind her eye. We were able to treat. She got better. She lost her vision, and then her vision came back with treatment. Mud and spit, you know. Little baby has pus in her eyes because of being born to a mom who has gonorrhea, easily treated, but would have been blind had they not come into the hospital. This is one of the things that can actually cause me to walk out of a room. This little kid is we see a lot of cases like this because of malaria and meningitis. This kid is extremely agitated and developmentally delayed. Acts about like a 4 or 5 month old. And I think he was 5 in this picture. Non-stop. Mom's got to hold him all day. And mom and this kid shows up well-nourished, and the kid shows up clean. And this kid will never be normal. And this mom is racked with this kid for the rest of their lives. And yet, the care that this mom is showing this kid makes me stop, because I can't imagine having that kind of care for that kind of kid. There is just so much beauty in this culture. Radical beauty. There's a lot of problems. There's some radical beauty. We have oxygen concentrators that don't need oxygen tanks. This little guy is on oxygen for pneumonia. He got better. This shows you what we have to use for oxygen. The concentrator is next to the bed. Next to the concentrator is a transducer that transfers or transposes or whatever's energy from 110 in the concentrator to 220. It goes out the window to a little generator that we have out the window that's 220 so that we can give oxygen. A little bit of a complicated process. Another newborn who needed oxygen and did well. This is our first COVID patient that we knew for sure, because you may have heard the term happy hypoxic. She came in, she didn't think she was short of breath. We put her oxygen meter on just to get her vital signs in. It was like 56 or 59, and she wasn't even short of breath. Right in the middle of COVID, so we knew what it was. She stayed with us for about 5 weeks, and she did wonderfully, walked home without any problems. She came from a city. She had gone to several hospitals there. They don't use pulse oximeters in the city. So what symptoms are you having? I feel pretty good. And both sons are college educated in the city, and they're saying, my mom is not right. Something is wrong. She doesn't feel right. She's not herself. I don't remember the specifics. She came to us, and within 30 seconds, we put that on her finger because it's part of our normal vital signs, and we saw the problem was low oxygen. We put oxygen on her. She was back to herself. From a city 5-6 hours away, brought in by 2 college-educated kids or people in a car. We would never have cars drive up to our hospital, but she did great. This little girl has full-body tetanus. Her face is fixed like that, and she was treated for 2 or 3 weeks and did well, completely cured. We have a lot of diarrhea. Diarrhea is a major killer, but it doesn't kill if you can hydrate. And so these little kids had IVs that we had to put in the bones in their shins, and it was just a cute picture because we had 2 kids who came in 5 minutes apart and were almost dead from dehydration, and then we put them both together in the same room, and within a couple of hours they were nursing and smiling and feeling better. We have normal stuff, normal ER stuff. This guy fell off his motorcycle, broke his neck, and was paralyzed from the shoulder down. I think he actually, so we immobilized him, sent him to our surgery friends. They didn't do surgery, but they put him in traction for like a month or 6 weeks, and he recovered. Don't know what that picture is. I'm sure there's a story with it. A lot of burns. When you live around open fires, you get a lot of burns. Some of them are more nasty than others. Kids falling into the fire. This lady's hand was crispy. I mean, there was nothing left. This lady had a pressure cooker she had put on her open fire, and at some point, for whatever reason, the pressure cooker exploded, and she's completely covered in burns. She was with us for about 3 months, I think, before we were able to kick her out. Huge problem that we see, and this is because it's a culture with no access to evidence-based medicine. Everybody goes to the shaman first. The shamans are salesmen. The shamans sell themselves and their products well. The only success they have is placebo, right? We all know that. Placebo is 30%. If you don't have a serious disease, if you go to the right person and they can convince you, 30% of the people will walk away feeling better. And that's how they market their products. That's how they market their service. Well, in our culture, everybody goes to the shaman first because they've never had a physician. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention too, please feel free to get up and grab something more to eat, and informal. So shaman is always the first place people go if there's not a need to go somewhere right now. I don't think the shamans are necessarily malicious. I don't think they're trying to hurt anybody, but they kill a lot of people because they mix up herbs. They don't know what plants they're mixing. They just think, oh, this one and this one and this one. They don't know that a lot of the plants that they pick are liver toxic. So we have 2 or 3 women in our hospital every single day dying of liver failure because they went to the shaman for, I haven't been pregnant in 3 months, or I've had a headache for the last 3 days, or my back hurts. They go for something minor and they leave the shaman dying. This lady has a belly full of fluid called ascites. She's getting drained into a bucket. We have some of these guys that'll be with us for 3 months, and we'll drain them every 2 or 3 days and use medicine to try and help as well. But essentially, if the liver damage is enough, we watch them die. One of our philosophies regarding that is, one, we give each one a sucker. You might notice in her mouth. But the other thing, another principle associated with this is one of my heroes is Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa talked a lot about caring for people no matter the result. Every person who's sick, who needs help, has the dignity. They have enough dignity that they deserve to be treated well. So we have these people who come in, they've been essentially abused by some idiot and are, I guess that's mine. And in our talks, we're talking all the time. Don't go to the shamans. They don't know what they're mixing and what they're giving. They give stuff in the rectum. They give stuff, they cut up, they make all kinds of cuts on the skin and rub stuff in. They give stuff in drinks. They even boil soup, pull it out with a syringe and give shots. I mean, it's just crazy. But it's this whole thing where they're the richest guy in the village. They probably have every intention of helping, but there's no wisdom and no way to study the results. Another kid, same thing, liver failure. Another liver failure, getting drained. This is how young they start. This kid has a body, got a hernia. His umbilical hernia is nothing. It'll heal by itself, but it's just protruding because he's full of fluid. The fluid's going down. He's got 2 hernias caused from the fluid that's causing the fluid to go in his scrotum as well. This kid is like, if I remember right, 2 weeks old or 3 weeks old. They took him to the shaman already. And the shaman already gave him liver toxic stuff. And the kid, I don't remember if he died or not, but he's got liver, his liver was poisoned. This is what we get brought to us in a baby bottle. So they mix this stuff up with water, probably water from the river, and they give that to their babies. And how do you deal with a culture like that? We're always instructing, but we're from another culture. We're from another world. And one of the biggest learning experiences that I've had over the past 9 years, is how important trust is in any relationship, but especially in a caregiver relationship. Here, we tend to think that if they have the degrees on the wall, they should be well qualified. And then if something goes wrong, we got a lawyer that we can send in, right? There, they don't have any of that. And so it's all trust. And so they have to decide, do I go to my grandmother? Do I go to the shaman? Do I go to the city? Or do I go to this Kavango thing that I've been hearing about? That's a decision that they have. And they don't know how to distinguish them. So we're telling these people all the time. I tell them in a morning session, I'll tell them about medical studies, how we use rats, how we use monkeys, how we test products. They can't imagine 1,000 rats. They've never seen a cage. These guys have never seen a laboratory. They've never seen so much. It's really difficult. It's almost as difficult as trying to describe to them snow, which we've tried to do.
So the shaman, are they in Kavango as well?
Not in Kavango proper. No, we don't have one.
So you
but
don't
every
have
village.
Immediate confrontation with the shaman in the hospital.
Yeah, with a few, and they're slick. I mean, when you meet a shaman, you've met a shaman. Oh, are they good? They would be like in this. We would call that they could sell, they could sell you a used car that didn't run, that type of thing, right? They are slick, and nice, and friendly, and usually charismatic, and good-looking, and all of it, and that's the shaman. So I can almost tell you, there's been a few times where someone has walked into the room, and I said to myself, "That's a shaman," and it was. So one of the things we've done is we would like to build a relationship with these guys and actually partner with them and give them something actually valid to do, like show them how to make a diagnosis of malaria, give them tests and give them medicine. But I haven't met one yet that I trust. Everyone I've met with when I've had that idea, I didn't trust them. But these guys are still in the process of learning to trust us. So when I talk to them and say, look guys, you put this in your baby's bottle, that's going to kill them. They've got to decide, do I believe this guy or not? We see a lot of horrendous wounds. This lady came in, and in 2 weeks, she was walking with a normal foot. She just didn't know where to go. She had this for like 8 months. It started out like a little pimple, and it just spread. All she needed was some care. We used warm water, and we took off the dead tissue, and we put her on antibiotics, and she was walking like in 2 weeks. All kinds of people. I will say before I go on, there's going to be a few pictures that some people might consider a little disturbing, so just so you know. But again, it's reality. It's totally what we see, and I've taken out the real disturbing ones. But this is a kid who went to a local nurse who in his home gave this kid an injection in each cheek for something, who knows? And the injection most commonly used is a vitamin. And the nurse in his home undoubtedly charged for it. These guys will use needles for a month or 2 months every single day on different people. We see these. Eduardo, I just talked to Eduardo last week. He had 7 or 8 last week, 1 a day. Huge. This is almost healed. This started out with a cheek 3 times normal size full of pus. We get the pus out, we put a drain in, he's almost healed. But that's how we get all kinds of these shots. They don't have alcohol, and they use a needle until it's so burred that they can't put it into the skin anymore. This guy's great story. He came in because he had a horrible infection in his leg, but he couldn't breathe. So we did an ultrasound on him, and he had fluid around his heart. Essentially pus. He had thick, milky pus around his heart, so much so that his heart couldn't expand, couldn't beat. So we had to put a needle into called pericardium, put a needle into that area, take out the pus, like 3 times in consecutive days. And this is him before going home. His leg's almost healed. He's going home. He did great. But horrendous infection that traveled from his leg to around his heart. This little kid has what's called supraglottitis. It's a dental infection that's gone crazy, and he didn't survive the night because it occluded his airway. And we don't have any means of putting an airway in. Bad foot wound, he did great after some simple treatment. This is a very common illness. It's called NOMA. It's multibacterial. It happens in malnourished kids. And he healed up great. And it was nutrition, antibiotics, and cleaning. And he went home looking almost normal. This is scabies. We've all heard of scabies. This is infected scabies, severe form. He had this for like 6 weeks before they finally brought him here, and within a week he was better. Chickenpox, infected chickenpox. Just everything gets to a point that's so severe. This is a wound. She had a bandage over the wound. We take the bandage off, and this is what's going on underneath. They have nowhere to go. She had this for weeks, and she finally came in to see us. This guy was attacked by a leopard. This guy's head was inside the mouth of a leopard, and we had to fix him up. This kid got an infection in the foot. The foot got so bad, they amputated the leg. A year later, he gets an infection in the other foot. Remember, barefoot, outside. Spread up the leg, lost his leg. Within the next few months, left arm. Gets an infection in his hand. Infection spreads up his arm, loses his left arm. Came in to see us. You can't really tell in the picture. His right arm is swollen. It continued. We sent him to our surgeons. The infection continued. He lost that arm. And I don't think lasted more than a year in that condition. But in a gradual, it's a great, great, great illustration as to why we're there. This kid had a simple wound that if treated with antibiotics at the beginning would never have lost any limbs and would be still alive today. This was several years ago. That's why we're there. This couple was 90, both over 90 years old, so I had to take a picture. It does happen. They survive it all for 90 years. This is a gnarly old guy who came in after not being able to pee for a week. And this is him before going home. He's doing a lot better. But essentially, you know that men will develop prostate problems over time. Here we have all kinds of treatments for it. There they don't. So eventually they can't pee. When they can't pee, they die if they don't get help. So he comes in to see us. We put a little catheter in, and he pees, and it's all he needs. This guy has bladder cancer. You can see it down. See the tumor? Bladder cancer is a huge problem, parasite that enters the skin. It's called schistosomiasis. Enters the skin, travels up to the bladder, causes a little inflammation, usually in kids who are joining their mom while their mom is in stagnant water washing clothes. No problem. Kid might pee a little bit of blood. They don't think anything of it. Doesn't make the kid sick. But this causes a long-standing minor inflammation over years and years and years in the bladder. Eventually leads to cancer. Few countries in the world have more bladder cancer than Angola because this little parasite, which can be treated with one pill, one time a year, which we offer at our clinic. One pill, one time a year, but the government doesn't have any, and they won't distribute it. But bladder cancer is all over the place. This is a tumor that just grew. Imagine, you got nowhere to go, and a tumor grows this big before you finally come in to see us. It was gone. We took it out with surgery. This I call Job's disease. It's a known disease, awful, awful disease. It's a blister. The blisters break. They become infected. Itch, scratch, pain, horrible. This is what he looked like after treatment. He did great, and about 2 weeks of treatment, and he was a new man. This guy draining out, he had what's called inflamed gallbladder without stones. The reason his gallbladder was inflamed was because he had a parasite, which is essentially a pork tapeworm. This is one of the reasons that we kill pigs that wander on the hospital property. We sent him, they took his gallbladder out and it's full of cysts because of this pork tapeworm. Same tapeworm is in this girl's eye. and easily treated. She was fine in a week. But this pork tapeworm is because pigs are wandering everywhere, and they're wandering in their fields, they're wandering on their vegetables, and when they eat pigs, when you cook over an open fire, you don't cook anything as well as you can. I think I'm getting close. Thanks for hanging with me. This guy's got a tube in his belly. He's got what's called typhoid fever. Typhoid fever causes little wounds in the intestine, and when they perforate, in other words, they become really thin, and then the stool leaks out into the abdomen, it's deadly. He did well. This guy had the same thing. This little kid's smiling. He's doing better, but if you look closely, he's got a tube coming out of his belly, going up around his neck, and then down into a sac. He's draining nice. We have plenty of leprosy. This guy's got leprosy of the face. This guy's got leprosy of his hands. She's got leprosy on her face. Tuberculosis is a big scourge where we are. This is the guy coming in, and this is him 2 months later. Just after 2 months, he's going to get 4 more months of treatment. He did great. He was a great personality. You can even tell by looking at him. But TB is huge. It just eats your body away. And easily treated. We see about 300 TB patients a year, and it's kind of fun part of our practice because they almost all get better, and they're almost all with us for 2 months. We treat the first 2 months, so they get 2 months of morning meetings, so they get to hear about Jesus quite a bit while they're there for 2 months.
Tim, why is it so prevalent there? Why is TB so...
Yeah. Great question. So it's theorized that about half of the world is infected with TB, but a far minority of that actually have the disease because the disease becomes active when the body becomes weak. So the main reason is malnutrition. Or they have malaria, weakens the body, something like that causes the body to become weak. That's why HIV people have TB, because something has made the body weak. It brings up a good point. All of the diseases that we are treating here, whether they're parasite, whether it's malaria, whether it's TB, it's all a disease of poverty. It's all diseases of lack of access to nutrition and lack of access to medical education and medical knowledge. This guy's got TB. He's getting pus drained out of his chest. Same. They're radically better when that happens. This poor thing had pus around her heart, both sides of her chest, and her abdomen, all from TB, because she was dealing with this TB for 8 or 9 months before she finally came to see us. That's lack of access. That's the responsibility, in my opinion, the responsibility of the church. That's why these guys don't have access, because we've got a church that doesn't care. This is a fun picture only because this Eduardo is draining pus from around this little girl's heart, but I love the look that she's giving Eduardo. She's not thrilled. We didn't use anesthesia, but she held really still with a little help. This mom, actually grandma, carried her granddaughter 15 miles. This granddaughter wasn't walking because of TB of the hip. She carried her for 15 miles and brought her in to see us, and within 3 days, the kid was out playing around and running. Got completely better. This guy came in paralyzed from the waist down from TB. We treated him about 2 or 3 weeks later. Here he is taking his first step. He went home with absolutely no deficits. This guy was in a coma for 3 weeks, and then we discovered that he also had TB of the spine. So he had TB of the brain, TB of the spine. Here he is taking his first step. TB of the skin. TB, again, ravaging a body, right? A lot of cataracts, a lot of eye diseases. The white pupils are simply the lens behind the pupil becoming opaque. We have that problem here, but people there who are outside all the time have a lot more damage to their lens. This lady was absolutely thrilled. She is one of the few people who I've met who've come to our clinic who are a genuine Jesus lover. You can see it in the picture, right? She's been a Jesus lover, she said, since she was like in her 20s and radiated Jesus. We told her that she could have her eyes repaired and she would see again, she was pretty thrilled. This guy has a disease called trachoma. It's a bad case of conjunctivitis we don't have in this country anymore. Same thing here. This is what a lot of villages look like. The young kids are assigned an older person who can't see, and they lead them around with a stick. Malaria is probably the most difficult thing that we treat, and it's a huge killer. Oops, sorry. Huge killer. It destroys the blood. It can affect any organ in the body. And a lot of kids come in coma from cerebral malaria. This kid came in coma, cerebral malaria. He's getting a blood transfusion in his shin. We do a lot of blood transfusions. This is dad giving his blood so that we can give to his kid. This is a pretty cool picture showing you the difference between it before and after getting blood. Picture on the left is the pale nail because the blood's so weak, and on the right, same kid in his feet with nice pink nails. This is a malaria kid before going home, came in a coma. Eduardo giving a little bit of his blood. We all give a lot. Every chance. We try to wait a reasonable amount of time before we donate again, but blood is a huge demand. More malaria. Jocelyn giving some more blood transfusions, all because of malaria, almost exclusively. This kid came in a coma, was in a coma for, I think, close to a week, and went home fine. And again, why do some kids get malaria and why do some kids get malaria but don't go in a coma? I think it's so much about nutritional status. This kid, same thing, going home. This kid enjoying his poke in the leg. This is a kid that was in a coma for, I think, over a week and getting his or her first sucker.
Are you going to get the vaccine for malaria, do you think?
I hope so. It won't come to Angola for years, but I would love to get everything I've read about it. Vaccine for malaria. Everything that I've read about it is that it will radically reduce, especially childhood deaths. So I think it's going to have huge value. Another malaria kid coma. This was an interesting, kind of a fun story. Fun in an African, sad sort of way. But the mother came in and she had pelvic infection. And so we have to treat her, and then we have to treat the husband because it's a sexually transmitted disease. So I said to her, we always ask, in this culture, there's no such thing as a man with only one wife. They all have 3 or 4 wives. And so we always have to ask this question. So, ma'am, have you had relations with any other man? No. Of course, offended. The man, have you had any relations with any other woman? No. And the woman immediately turns to him and says, then why, after every time you have sex with another woman, I end up in here with this infection? So he actually immediately denied it, and the woman said, every time, which means this is a common occurrence. But the man with a smile said, no. And so there's so many things wrapped up in that regarding the old African culture. 1, women suffer. 2, men treat women like absolute property. 3, every time we treat a woman with a pelvic infection, we have to treat the man and his other women. And we know that half the time they're not telling us the truth about how many they have. 4, the man blatantly lied without any concern about lying whatsoever, even though the person next to him knew the truth, right? There's no such thing as telling the truth in Angola. You only say what you think is the most appropriate thing to say. Truth has no value. So the interaction was quite interesting. Another goiter. This lady had it for 30 years. Malnutrition, kind of obvious cases, but we see several cases like this every day. This is a before, after, and an after picture. They look quite good once we get some nutrition in them. We have a lot of hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is caused by inflammation of the brain at a young age because there are fluid in our brain is constantly being produced and drained. And malaria and meningitis in young kids block the drainage. And so the head becomes bigger and bigger because of an increase in fluid. So we have a lot of hydrocephalus cases which we can send to Lubango and they can put a drain in. And if we get it early enough, the kid can live a normal life. This guy died from rabies. We have rabies come through twice a year. We often have rabies vaccines. We have to go to another country to get them. Nowhere else in Angola can you get rabies vaccines. So if you get rabies, you die. This guy died because at the time we had rabies vaccines, but he came in after he had already started manifesting the disease of rabies, and nobody survives rabies when they start manifesting the disease. This is a great story. I'll wrap up here real quick. In my morning walk and run to the river, usually it's a little pre-dawn, and I'm getting down by the river, and all of a sudden I hear, "Doctor! Doctor!" And it's quiet and dark. "Doctor!" And I stop and I start looking, following the voice over to the weeds, and down in the weeds is this guy, covered in mosquitoes. What's the story? I got here at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and I couldn't make it up the hill. So I laid down here, and I heard I don't know how he figured it was me, but I heard somebody coming, and so I started yelling. And took him to the hospital, went back home, got my car, came back, got him, took him to the hospital, severe heart failure. Couldn't walk up the hill because of severe heart failure. He had taken two motorbike rides and walked for 2 days to get to that river, crossed the river in a canoe because we didn't have that raft, and laid down because he couldn't make it up. You can see the hill behind him. Couldn't make it up the hill, and he did great. He went home pretty much healed. This is a great picture of a guy who came in heart failure. Some pictures you can't, they're just pictures of people. She had severe heart failure, went home. This is my favorite patient of all. She was born with what a lay person would call a plastic heart. It doesn't squeeze. Severe heart failure, and we've treated her now. She shouldn't have lived a month, and we've treated her for, I think, 5 or 6 years. Beautiful mother, beautiful, caring, trusting mother, and she's adorable, and I get to see her every month when she comes back for medication refill, but she's been doing great. The last couple pictures, this shows our ambulance loading up someone, getting ready to take them to the airplane, urgent surgery, to fly to Lubango to get surgery. We send, I think, an average of about 2 patients a week. It's about an hour away on dirt, and it's a dirt airstrip. This is the ambulance kind of full and ready to go. This is Betsy loading up on a day we didn't have the ambulance or the ambulance already left. She's putting somebody in the back of the pickup truck on a mattress and taking them to the airstrip, which is sometimes the way we have to do it. This is one of the planes that we use. The other thing I do is I fly with MAF to other rural areas in Angola to do clinics where they don't have physicians, and this is landing. They're always thrilled to see us, and so this is a landing at one of those places where they're so glad that we've come. This is some idiot up on the wing trying to rock the plane because the plane is actually stuck in mud. Sometimes the plane actually gets stuck in the rainy season. This is just a picture. The child in the cot is dead. This is the mom. Mom brought him in on a motorbike, laid him on the table, hoping that we would treat him, and he had already died. This is us with the ambulance or with a car taking a body back to their village. The guy in the middle here is dead. This is how they transport dead bodies. They will wrap, the guy in the back will wrap his arms around and hold him until they get to the village. And it's just a picture to show that we deal with a lot of death. We probably average 3 or 4 deaths a week. It doesn't get any easier. That's not why we see ourselves as there. But we also know that we're not saviors and we're not God. And back to Mother Teresa, that no matter who comes in, they're worthy of our love, they're worthy of our service, they're worthy of us washing their feet or treating them in whatever way we can treat them, serve them. And we have to allow the results to be in our Father's hands. And so we deal with a lot of death. The death, I think you can kind of get used to those grieving who bring the patient in. That's hard to get used to, you know, especially when so many of our deaths are young deaths. I don't know how many of you guys have said thank you to a doctor. Nobody does. Nobody does there either. So this lady, about 2 weeks after she left, came back and brought us a chicken to say thank you. I thought that was, so I took a picture. That was pretty cool. This is this is the type of thing that gets you back the next day. This lady came in not walking. Her back pain was so severe. And this is her getting ready to go home. No pain, no pain. No pain, no pain. Isn't that great? I caught it just at the end. She had been doing that. You know how you, oh no, I got to get this on film, you know? So I caught the very end, but that's the type of thing that will get you back. Finish up. For those of you who are supporting us, for those of you who are partnering for us, praying for us, these are some brief statistics about what we do in Kavango, this little outpost with no electricity. In 2021, we saw 7,000 new consultations. We had 1,500 admissions. That's about 5 a day, 4 or 5 a day. We average about 80 inpatients a day. Half of those usually are sleeping on the ground. We have 60 beds that we can use, beds or mattresses. 300 active TB patients. We gave 250 messages in the morning. 20,000 people heard about Jesus at those morning messages that we give an hour before the clinic starts. How cool is that? We don't even keep track of that. I did it at the end of 21 so that I could turn in statistics and realize that as I counted the number of messages and the number of people, 20,000 people. And probably 20,000 different people, or mostly different, because people come and they go, right? People come and they go. We don't have to go to them. It's such a beautiful setup. Over 100 people we sent with MAF for surgery. One of the most common, last slide, one of the most common questions that I'm asked is how do you spend the resources that you get? And this will give you an idea. So life-threatening surgeries that we send to CML, we spend about $40,000 a year. Medications and instruments, we spend about $20,000 a year. It's not that much because we try to make our clinic as self-sustaining as possible. So the patients pay for their meds, and we use that money to buy new meds, and we sell it to the patients at cost, which is about 5 times cheaper than if they bought it at the city because we have no markup. And they know that. The amount that they pay for a consultation is what we use to pay salaries for nurses. So it's almost a self-sustaining clinic. The medication and instruments usually are new things that we're bringing in. I'm taking about $12,000 worth of stuff with me this time when I go back. Stuff that we don't have, stuff we can't get in Angola. We have 2 diabetics. The 2 diabetics that need insulin every day, this is juvenile onset diabetes, the kind you get when you're young. We've had one kid with us for about 6 years and never would have survived had it not been for him living with us and getting his insulin every day. We want to build him a small house, 1-room house, and there's a woman, 17-year-old girl woman who came within the last year, and she's going to have to live with us to get her insulin every day. And we want to build her a little house too. So that's going to cost us about $5,000 each. Solar unit, we'd like to have energy. We'd like to have electricity at the end of this year. We think it's going to cost us about $8,000. We have some building and container costs when we ship things over. Construction labor, we spend about $3,000 a month. Most of the guys in our construction teams work for about $3 a day. And they do a good job working hard. We want to paint the new building. If we get the funds, it will cost $15,000. Prices in Angola are stiff because everything is imported. A floating barrel bridge over the Kubango I described earlier, $3,000. Teachers training, we would like to take local people send them off to the city for 4 years to be trained to be teachers, and then they would come back home and they would teach our kids Portuguese and reading. And if our kids would learn Portuguese, it connects them to their country. If they learn reading, it connects them to the world. And so that's our desire. We can't bring people from the city because nobody will live in Kavango. So we want to send people from Kavango to be trained, then they would be coming back home, and then they would be teaching our kids. It'd be about $2,000 a year. Training in X-ray tech, $2,000. X-ray unit we want to buy for $30,000. A guy from Columbus told me that he wants to raise that for us. So he's gonna put on a program to raise $30,000. So it's just so beautiful. Lab machines. When we get electricity, we hope to have about 20,000. Hope to have a couple simple machines that'll cost probably about 20,000. If we fence in the whole 1,200 meters, the whole hospital campus, it'll cost about 20,000. Shelter house for sleeping families, we think will cost about 20,000. Total about 200,000. So 200,000 looks like a lot of money. It does to me. It does to all of us. But maybe someone here knows of a company or knows of somebody who would like to do something crazy cool, because there's so many people out there who would like to help what we're doing, but they don't know how. And so if you know of anybody, there's nothing that is more powerful for us than to have an advocate for us. We can talk about the work that we're doing, but it's kind of, we have a horse in the race, you know? But if someone else, if Barb goes and says, hey, I know of this work in Angola, and they're doing awesome stuff, and you can be a part of that. Barb doesn't have a horse in the race. You know, that's powerful. We fully believe, more than I did when I lived in the States 20, 30 years ago, fully believe what Jesus talked about as far as the body of Christ. We are the fingers. We're there, we're touching people. Those fingers cannot get to those people without elbows, wrists, shoulders, right? And everybody here, some of you are already supporting this work. Everybody here can be a shoulder or a wrist, and somebody here could be fingers too, and go and stay there with us. But everybody can participate. We, in America, we can kind of think, oh, missionary, wow, you know, he's over and doing this, that, and the other. Missionary. Nobody hears about the elbows and the shoulders that are sending this missionary, that are a must for this missionary to be in Angola. Nobody hears about them. Which one do you think is going to be good, well done, good and faithful servant? I think in the kingdom of God, it's most often the hidden one, you know? Who's the greatest among us? It's the one that serves. Whether we serve as fingers or whether we serve as elbows, sending the fingers, they're equal in the kingdom of God. We can't be there without people sending us. And so when we talk about money, money is this subject that gets difficult, but we can't operate without money, and we can't raise money while we're over there. The only way we can operate is with crazy, beautiful people here who say, I trust you, and I support what you're doing, and I want to see more people like that get better. And this is our website. If you don't know, we have a website at kubackisinangola.com. It'll tell a little bit about our ministry. There's always a lot of pictures. And I usually twice a month post a blog about what's going on in me and some of the stories of people that we're seeing, similar to what you've heard tonight. That's all I got. Questions?
What's their main diet? I mean, when they can grow food or what do they, what is their?
Yeah, great question. Let me see if I can find a quick picture. So it is called, this is it. So this, what looks like potatoes, is like a real firm consistency grits. So essentially it's corn ground to flour and mixed with water. And they eat that twice a day. And when they eat that twice a day, they're doing well. So they call it fuba or they call it funge after it's cooked. But it's pretty decent. It's pretty decent nutrition. And then if they can eat something with it, they're doing pretty decently. But that's their diet. Corn. So they grow this feed corn. We would call it feed corn, tough corn. And then they ground it. When it dries, they ground it into powder, mix it with water twice a day. Any other questions? Comments? Criticisms? Thanks.
You said the last time you were here that you meet their needs first because they're hurting so bad, then they hear about Jesus.
Mm.
And when I heard that, it kind of threw me off a little bit. But when you and I and Mark Brownman were sitting there, you kind of got into a little bit more of it. I can appreciate, it's like the Mother Teresa. Help them first and then they'll listen to you.
So true. We've sure seen that. I don't know if you could hear kind of the idea of meet their needs first and then share with them who you want to introduce them to. Then introduce them to your Father, after you care for them. And what's that saying? They won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Something like that. And I think that really applies, especially in the third world when you got a guy from another culture who doesn't speak the language well, who's working through a translator. There's a lot of trust issues there, right? But there's something about, I can see why Jesus placed serving at such a priority, because there's just something about washing someone's feet, washing their wound, caring for them, praying for them, embracing them when you see them in the morning, giving them a sucker. All of a sudden you see that trust dynamic change a little bit. And so I think it's so true.
Just to see a smile on a kid's face.
Yeah, that's why I give suckers. It's purely selfish. I want to be around smiling kids.
Is there any ministry, like with the mission church you mentioned, where they're kind of, with outreach, continuing what you begin to plant in people that come to the clinic through your talks? Because like you mentioned, talking to 20,000 plus people, and a lot of them different people.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some sort of outreach happening from that mission church to kind of continue that?
Yeah, so is there some kind of outreach after people go home? Is there any way to keep
Like
contact?
They have no Bibles and things like that, and they hear about Christ, but then,
Mm-hmm.
you don't get to see what happens after that.
No, never. No, a couple thoughts on that. One is Jesus never did. And Jesus never pursued, and he never spent a whole lot of time persuading people. So that's one thought. And that's one thought that's given me a little comfort, in that speak it and scatter seeds and leave the rest to God, because we don't have anybody to do that. As soon as we would have somebody who would, in fact, we have someone coming in July, Betsy and I were just talking about it this morning, that she is a Portuguese-speaking, raised in Brazil American who wants to come and visit for a couple weeks and wonders what she can do. And the first thing I'm going to do is put her in a car and say, we've got 20 villages. Go to those villages, sit down, gather some people together, and just talk and share how they can improve their physical and spiritual health. So as soon as we get somebody who's interested in doing that, and the thing that people don't realize, if someone who is not in healthcare and they have a high school education in the States, they will know enough that they could go to those villages and they could share. You can improve your health by drinking clean water. Let's talk about clean water. How can we make your water clean? That sort of thing. Yeah, so it's a dream. Hopefully one day.
Do you have a church in your village?
We do. Our mission is under the direction of a denomination that's only in Angola. Hyper religious, hyper moral. I think there's a few people who understand that we can walk with Jesus in relationship. I think there's a few maybe. But for the most part, it is very difficult to call it a church of Jesus. It's a church, it's a, whatever you call it, right? They have services. Yeah, they have services. So services are it. Like they think they have, so if some of us remember some of us old timers, we can remember back when church was something you did on Sunday morning and the rest of your life was your life, right? But you went to church. You got that done. It was a sense of obligation, duty, and then you had your life. That's the way it is in Angola. You show up, you do church, and then you never think of God or talk about God after that the rest of the week.
Do they actually teach the gospel message?
No, they teach Bible stories, and they do a lot of singing, which is okay because most of the singing that they do, so they will have 4 or 5, 6 choruses. Is that right? Chorus? No. Choirs. So the women, then the youth, then the men, then they've all learned a song during the week and they sing it. The cool thing about that is most of these songs are pretty solid gospel messages, and that's how it gets in them. So in that sense, it's cool. The actual service itself, to hear all these people singing, it's kind of tough to tolerate because it's kind of a performance thing, but it does serve a really cool function. And so there's positives. There's definitely some positives. And like Paul said, some people preach right, some people preach wrong. I'm just going to be glad that Jesus is being preached. And that's a lot of the times the way I feel. Thanks so much. Not only did you show up, but you showed up and stayed. So thank you. What's that? One other thing, any of you guys, we are here until the 22nd. Anybody who's interested in learning more, those are meetings that we enjoy. And so feel free to contact us, and we would love, the one thing about the presentation and stuff, it doesn't allow us to connect, really. So if that would be a desire, you would have to sit down with us and maybe even just get to know each other better or renew a relationship. It's something that would be a joy for us. So please, you're invited. So please let us know. We're not too busy. And we'd love to meet with you more. And not just talk about us, maybe talk about you sometime, a little bit of time too. But thanks so much. Let's wrap up, huh? Anybody other questions? Father, we are so grateful that we can serve you. And we're sorry that more people aren't interested, but we're glad for the few that are. And we're glad that you like reaching into horrible situations and you like to send your people to be your hands in horrible situations. And we all volunteer to use us however you will, Lord, whether it's as an elbow or a finger or whatever. Would you just please use us? Please use us. Please use us to make a difference, not just to live, but to make a difference. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for your presence here. Thanks for being able to be a part of your family and being able to call you Father. Amen. Thanks, guys.